Sometimes, heroes don't wear badges or uniforms. Sometimes they walk on four legs. When this canine wouldn't stop digging under the porch, the family thought it was nothing but strange behavior. But what they discovered hidden in the shadows would leave them frozen in disbelief. And before the story ends, you'll see why this moment would change everything they thought they knew about loyalty. It started on a Tuesday morning that felt like any other. Joanna Miller was sipping her coffee, watching through the kitchen window as Rocky bounded around their backyard with his usual morning energy. But then, something shifted. Rocky stopped mid-stride. His ears perked up, his entire body freezing like he'd heard a gunshot. Then he did something Joanna had never seen in 6 years of loving this dog. He dropped to the ground and pressed his nose against one specific spot under their wraparound porch. And he stayed there. "Tom!" Joanna called to her husband upstairs. "Rocky is acting weird." But weird didn't begin to cover it. Within minutes, Rocky was digging. Not the playful, curious digging dogs do when they find an interesting smell. This was different, desperate, frantic, like his life depended on reaching whatever was down there. Joanna knelt beside him, tried to coax him away. "Come on, boy. It's probably just a squirrel." But when she reached for his collar, Rocky did something that made her heart skip. He looked directly into her eyes and whimpered. Not a playful whine, a plea. Tom came outside, took one look at the scene, and shook his head. He's probably smelled a raccoon or possum under there. He'll get bored and stop. But Rocky didn't stop. For 6 years, this German Shepherd had been the picture of obedience, the kind of dog neighbors envied. Gentle with children, protective but never aggressive, and so well-trained that he'd never so much as chewed a shoe. Their perfectly manicured suburban lawn was his playground, but he'd never damaged a single blade of grass. Now, he was tearing through their yard like a machine possessed. Tom tried everything he could think of. He rattled Rocky's food bowl, usually an instant attention getter. Nothing. He squeaked Rocky's favorite tennis ball, the one that normally sent him into a frenzy of joy. Rocky didn't even glance up. Tom even pulled out the big guns, bacon from the morning's breakfast, waving it right under Rocky's nose. Rocky ignored it all. Every treat, every command, every desperate attempt to redirect his attention failed completely. Something underground had captured not just his interest, but his soul. "This isn't normal," Joanna whispered, watching dirt fly as Rocky's paws worked like pistons. "Tom, this isn't normal at all." By evening, the hole was 2 feet deep and growing. Rocky's usually pristine golden coat was caked with mud, his paws raw from digging through roots and rocks. But he wouldn't stop. He wouldn't even pause for water. That night, Joanna barely slept. Every few hours, she'd peek out the window to find Rocky still there, still digging by moonlight, his silhouette ghostly against the porch. By dawn, she found him collapsed from exhaustion beside a hole now 3 feet deep, his sides heaving, his paws bleeding. "Rocky, please," she begged, kneeling in the mud beside him. "You're going to hurt yourself." But as she spoke, something made her freeze. A sound, so faint she almost missed it. Crying. Not Rocky. This was coming from underground. Weak, desperate, barely audible, but unmistakably real. Joanna's blood went cold. "Tom," she screamed. "Tom, get out here now." Whatever was down, there was alive. And from the sound of those cries, growing weaker by the hour, it was running out of time. Rocky lifted his exhausted head and looked at Joanna one more time. In his eyes, she saw something that chilled her to the bone. Not just determination, terror. He knew exactly what was down there, and he knew it was dying. Day 3 brought something Joanna Miller had never seen before in her life. Pure, unyielding desperation in the eyes of her beloved dog. Rocky hadn't eaten in 48 hours. His water bowl sat untouched. His usually pristine golden coat was now a canvas of mud, sweat, and determination. But it was his eyes that broke Joanna's heart. Wild, frantic, like he was fighting against time itself. The hole was now 4 feet deep and growing. Rocky's paws were bleeding, leaving crimson stains in the dirt, but he wouldn't stop. Couldn't stop. Every scrape of his claws against wood and stone echoed like a desperate plea. Joanna's hands trembled as she dialed animal control for the 3rd time. Please, she begged the dispatcher. Something is alive under our porch. Our dog has been trying to reach it for 3 days. The response was the same as before. Cold. Clinical. Ma'am, we can't authorize foundation excavation based on a dog's behavior. Have you considered that your pet might be having a behavioral episode? A behavioral episode. Joanna wanted to scream. This wasn't a behavioral episode. This was Rocky fighting for something's life. She called the fire department next, then a local animal rescue group, even her neighbor who worked in construction. The answer was always the same. We can't tear apart your foundation on a hunch. But it wasn't a hunch. Not to Rocky. Every few minutes, something extraordinary would happen. Rocky would stop digging and press his ear against the ground, listening with the intensity of a surgeon performing heart surgery. His entire body would go still, silent, and then his tail would give a single, deliberate wag. Not the happy wag of a dog who found a toy. This was communication. This was Rocky saying, "Hold on, I'm coming. Don't give up." Joanna watched this ritual with growing amazement. Rocky wasn't just digging randomly. He was following sounds, responding to something. Someone was down there, and they were talking to her dog. The crying sound were getting weaker, more sporadic. Whatever was trapped beneath their porch was losing strength, and Rocky knew it. His digging became more frantic, more desperate. Dirt flew in sheets, his paws working like pistons despite the blood and pain. Tom stood watching his dog destroy their yard with a mixture of awe and heartbreak. This wasn't the Rocky he knew. This was a dog transformed by purpose. A dog who had found his calling and would literally die trying to fulfill it. "Honey," Tom said quietly to Joanna, "look at him. Really look at him." Rocky's eyes held something Tom had only seen once before, in the delivery room when their daughter was born. The look of someone who knows that a life hangs in the balance, and failure isn't an option. That's when Tom made the decision that would change everything. He went to the garage and grabbed his shovel. Not the small gardening spade, but the full-size construction shovel he used for heavy projects. When he returned, Rocky looked up at him with eyes that seemed to say, "Finally, you understand." "If Rocky believes something's down there," Tom announced, plunging his shovel into the earth beside his dog, "then I believe Rocky." Together, they worked, man and dog, side by side, following the sounds that only Rocky could hear. With each shovelful of dirt, the crying grew slightly louder. More desperate, more real. Tom's shovel hit roots, then rocks, then something that made his blood freeze. Wood, old foundation timber, rotted and broken. But beneath it, movement, actual movement. Rocky went absolutely wild, barking with an excitement Joanna had never heard before. Not his playful bark or his protective bark. This was triumph. This was "I found them." Tom's hands shook as he cleared away more debris. The sounds were clearer now. Definitely crying. Definitely alive. But there was something else. Something that didn't make sense. Multiple voices. More than one cry for help. Joanna dropped to her knees beside the hole, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "How many are down there?" she whispered. That's when they heard it. A sound that made both humans freeze in absolute shock. Not human crying. Purring. Weak, grateful, desperate purring mixed with the tiniest mews imaginable. Rocky's tail wagged furiously as he looked at his humans with eyes that seemed to say, "I told you so. I told you they needed us." What they were about to discover would rewrite everything they thought they knew about their dog, about loyalty, and about the extraordinary lengths one soul will go to save another. Because this wasn't just a rescue story. This was something far more incredible. Tom's shovel scraped against something soft, something that moved away from the blade with a tiny, desperate sound. Joanna grabbed her phone's flashlight with shaking hands and aimed it into the hole. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a cavity beneath the porch foundation that neither of them had known existed. And there, curled in the furthest corner, were two glowing eyes staring back at them. Not human eyes, animal eyes, reflecting the light with an exhaustion so profound it made Joanna's heart clench. A mother cat, thin, bedraggled, her fur matted with mud and debris. But she wasn't alone. Pressed against her belly, barely visible in the dim light, were four tiny shapes. Kittens. So young their eyes hadn't even opened yet. So small they could fit in the palm of Joanna's hand. "Oh my God," Joanna whispered, tears already streaming down her face. "Tom, look at them." The mother cat lifted her head with tremendous effort, meeting Joanna's gaze. In those green eyes was a mixture of fear, exhaustion, and something else. Something that looked almost like gratitude. But that wasn't the part that stopped Tom's heart. That wasn't the part that made Joanna gasp, so loudly Rocky spun around to check on her. It was what the cat family was lying on. Rocky's blanket. His favorite blue fleece blanket that had mysteriously disappeared from his dog bed 3 days earlier. The one Joanna had searched the house for, assuming it had gotten mixed up in the laundry. There it was, carefully arranged in the small den like a nest. Like someone had deliberately placed it there for maximum warmth and comfort. "Wait," Tom said slowly, the pieces clicking together in his mind. "Wait, that's Rocky's blanket," Joanna finished, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked at Rocky, who was now sitting perfectly still, his tail wagging gently as he watched the cat family with the tenderness of a nurse checking on patients. The truth hit them both at the same time. This stray cat hadn't stolen Rocky's blanket. Rocky had given it to her. For 3 days, Rocky hadn't been trying to attack or chase this cat family. He'd been trying to save them. He'd somehow known they were trapped down there when recent rains had caused a partial foundation collapse, blocking their escape route. He'd heard their cries for help and responded the only way he knew how. By digging. By refusing to give up. By mounting a one-dog rescue mission that nobody else understood. Joanna sank to her knees in the mud, tears flowing freely now. "Rocky," she whispered. "You knew, didn't you? You knew they needed help." Rocky approached the hole slowly, carefully. No frantic energy now, just gentle concern. He lowered his massive head toward the tiny family and made the softest sound Joanna had ever heard him make. Not a bark or a whine. A greeting. A reassurance. The mother cat, despite her weakness, lifted her head to touch Rocky's nose with her own. The gesture was so tender, so full of gratitude, that Tom had to turn away to compose himself. "She's thanking him," Tom said, his voice cracking. "She's actually thanking him." But Rocky wasn't done. As they watched in amazement, he began to back away from the hole, then lay down flat on his belly, positioning himself so that his body blocked the wind that had been blowing into the cavity, creating a windbreak for the vulnerable family below. The mother cat's purr, weak but unmistakable, drifted up from the hole. Joanna couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was witnessing. Their dog, their loyal, incredible dog, had been conducting a rescue operation while they thought he'd lost his mind. For 3 days, while they'd worried about his strange behavior, Rocky had been the only thing standing between this cat family and death. He'd given them his most prized possession. He'd worked himself to exhaustion trying to reach them. He'd refused food and water because he knew they had neither. Tom knelt beside the hole, his construction worker hands surprisingly gentle as he assessed the situation. "We need to get them out," he said. "Carefully. The mama's weak and those babies—" Rocky whimpered softly, and when Joanna looked at him, she saw something in his eyes that made her chest tight with emotion. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. Not because his job was done, because finally his humans understood. The family he'd been trying to save was about to be saved. And Rocky, loyal, determined, incredible Rocky, had made it happen through sheer force of will and a heart bigger than anyone had ever imagined. But as Tom reached into the cavity to begin the delicate rescue, Joanna noticed something that made her freeze. Something that would make this story even more unbelievable than it already was. What happened next was the most beautiful rescue operation Joanna Miller had ever witnessed. Tom moved with the precision of a surgeon, his callous construction hands suddenly as gentle as a mother's touch. One by one, he lifted the tiny kittens from their makeshift den, each one no bigger than his palm, their eyes still sealed shut, their tiny bodies trembling from cold and hunger. Rocky positioned himself as the official supervisor of the operation. No longer frantic, no longer desperate, just watchful, protective, his tail wagging slowly rhythmically for the first time in 3 days. The first kitten mewed weakly as Tom placed it in Joanna's cupped hands. So tiny, so fragile, that Joanna held her breath, afraid she might hurt it simply by breathing too hard. The second kitten, slightly larger, already showed signs of the orange tabby markings it would grow into. The third was pure black except for a tiny white patch on its chest. The fourth, the smallest, was so quiet Joanna feared it might not make it. Then came a mother cat. Tom's hand shook as he carefully lifted her from the cavity. She was painfully thin, her ribs visible beneath matted fur, her body weak from days without food or water. But when she saw her babies safe in Joanna's arms, she found the strength to purr. Rocky approached slowly, and what happened next broke Joanna's heart in the most beautiful way. The mother cat, despite her exhaustion, reached out with one paw and touched Rocky's nose. Then, with tremendous effort, she licked his face. Once, twice, 3 times. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Rocky's tail wagged harder, and he made a sound Joanna had never heard before. A soft, rumbling noise that wasn't quite a bark, wasn't quite a whine. It was pure contentment, pure joy. For the first time in 3 days, Rocky ate. He drank water until his bowl was empty, then ate again. But he never strayed far from the box where the cat family was now safely nestled in clean towels. Later, as they sat in their living room watching Rocky gently nosing the kittens while their mother finally rested peacefully, the full scope of what had happened began to sink in. The veterinarian who examined the cat family confirmed what Joanna and Tom had suspected. The mother cat had been living under their porch for weeks, surviving on scraps and rainwater. Too feral, too frightened to approach humans for help. But when her babies were born and the recent storm caused a partial foundation collapse, trapping them in the cavity, she had faced a choice no mother should ever face. Watch her babies die, or trust the German shepherd who had somehow sensed their presence. Rocky hadn't just heard their cries for help. He had understood their desperate situation before even the mother cat fully realized how trapped they were. He had given them his blanket, positioned himself to block the wind, and then spent 3 days trying to alert the only humans he trusted to help. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Mama Belle, as Joanna had named her, was now sleek and healthy, her black coat gleaming, her green eyes bright with contentment. The 4 kittens had grown into rambunctious teenagers, tumbling over each other in play, but always under the watchful eye of their adoptive big brother. Rocky had appointed himself their official protector, their teacher, their guardian angel. And Belle, in return, treated Rocky with a reverence that spoke of deep, unshakable gratitude. Every morning, Joanna would find them together. Rocky sprawled on his side, for kittens curled against his warm belly, and Belle grooming his face with the devotion usually reserved for her own babies. Every evening, they would all pile together in Rocky's bed, a tangle of fur and purrs and gentle breathing that filled the Miller house with a peace Joanna had never known before. The neighbors called it the most beautiful thing they'd ever seen. A dog who had literally saved 5 lives through sheer determination and love. But Joanna knew it was more than that. Rocky hadn't just saved 5 lives that day. He had shown an entire family what true compassion looked like. He had demonstrated that heroism isn't about size or strength or species. It's about refusing to ignore suffering when you have the power to help. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who hear cries for help that everyone else misses. The ones who act when action seems impossible. The ones who give their most treasured possessions to those who need them more. Rocky had rewritten their understanding of loyalty, of family, of what it means to be truly good. And every single day, watching him gently nudge a kitten back towards safety or patiently endure Belle's grooming sessions, Joanna was reminded that the most profound acts of love often come in forms we never expect. But there was one more surprise waiting for the Miller family. One final twist that would make Rocky's story even more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. 3 years have passed since that incredible rescue, and the Miller house has become something of a local legend. Neighbors walk by just to catch a glimpse of the most extraordinary family anyone has ever seen. Rocky, now graying slightly around his muzzle, still patrols his domain with the pride of a patriarch. Belle, sleek and confident, rules the household with the grace of a queen who knows she's beloved. And the four kittens, now full-grown cats with personalities as distinct as their markings, treat their canine big brother with a devotion that stops strangers in their tracks. But Rocky's legacy extends far beyond his own backyard. Joanna started sharing their story online, and the response was overwhelming. Thousands of people wrote to tell her about their own experiences with animal heroes. Dogs who detected seizures before they happened. Cats who refused to leave their owners' sides during heart attacks. Horses who carried lost children to safety. Birds who alerted families to house fires. Each story carried the same thread of wonder, the same truth that Rocky had taught the Miller family that desperate Tuesday morning. Protection doesn't always come from where we expect it. Sometimes it comes from a heart that simply refuses to ignore suffering, no matter how hidden it might be. Sometimes heroism wears fur instead of a uniform. Sometimes rescue comes on four paws instead of in an ambulance. Sometimes the most profound acts of love happen in silence, witnessed only by those wise enough to pay attention. Rocky never received a medal for his 3-day rescue mission. He never got his picture in the paper or a parade in his honor. But every morning, when Belle gently grooms his graying face while her 4 children curl against his side, Rocky receives something far more precious than recognition. He receives the living proof that his sacrifice mattered, that his refusal to give up saved 5 lives, that his impossible loyalty created a family that defies every rule about natural enemies and proves that love truly has no boundaries. The veterinarian who treated Belle and her kittens said something that Joanna will never forget. In 40 years of practice, I've seen animals do incredible things, but I've never seen anything like what Rocky did. He didn't just save those cats. He orchestrated their entire rescue, from providing comfort to alerting the right humans at the right time. That's not instinct. That's intelligence. That's choice. That's pure, conscious heroism. And maybe that's the most beautiful part of Rocky's story. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't luck. It was a deliberate decision made by a dog who heard suffering and decided he wouldn't let it continue on his watch. How many of us can say we've made that choice? How many of us have heard the quiet cries for help around us and responded with Rocky's kind of unwavering determination? Rocky's story challenges us to listen more carefully, to pay attention to the signals others might miss, to trust our instincts when something feels wrong, to act with courage when action is needed. Because heroes aren't born. They're made in moments when ordinary souls choose to do extraordinary things. Have you ever witnessed an animal do something that left you absolutely speechless? Have you seen a pet, a stray, or even a wild creature show the kind of loyalty and intelligence that defies explanation? Share your story in the comments below, because every animal hero deserves to be celebrated. Every act of interspecies kindness needs to be remembered. Every moment when love conquers fear or prejudice or impossibility deserves to live on. Rocky's story reminds us that the most beautiful connections often happen between the most unlikely friends. That protection can come from the most unexpected guardians. That family is defined not by species or blood, but by the willingness to sacrifice for each other's well-being. If Rocky's incredible journey moved you, share this story with someone who needs to believe in heroes today. Share it with someone who's lost faith in goodness. Share it with someone who thinks miracles don't happen anymore. And if you want to hear more true stories of animal loyalty that will restore your faith in the beautiful connections happening all around us every single day, hit that subscribe button and join our community of people who believe that love really can conquer everything. Because in a world that sometimes feels divided, stories like Rocky's remind us of a simple, powerful truth. When it comes to protecting those we love, we're all capable of being heroes. The only question is, will we choose to listen when someone needs us most?